Firelight and fangs. The fire crackles. Its light flickers against the ancient canyon walls, painting orange ghosts across the stone. Sparks drift skyward like embers searching for stars, vanishing into the dark that presses against your little world. You sit cross-legged near the flames, the scent of smoke and charred bone thick in your nostrils. The child coughs softly. Someone adjusts a log, sending a flurry of sparks upward. Then silence. You feel it before you hear it. A ripple in the night, a shift in the air. Your breath catches. A primitive part of your mind, the part older than language, begins to scream. Something is out there. Eyes widen, heads turn. Every muscle tightens as the fire becomes a fragile boundary between your world and something ancient, something lethal. A low growl rolls across the stone like distant thunder. It doesn't just reach your ears, it enters you, vibrates in your ribs, makes your heart stutter. Your hand grips the spear tighter. You feel the smooth shaft, the balance of it. Its fire-hardened tip was sharpened earlier that day, tested against bark and bone. But now, facing that, it feels like a toy. Then you see them. 2 eyes, glowing amber orbs the size of your fists, hanging in the dark like malevolent stars. They float forward, slow, deliberate. Your mouth goes dry. The children huddle closer. Even the seasoned hunters, scar-faced and grizzled, go silent. The only sound is the fire and the breathing. It steps into the light. Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat. 7-inch fangs glint in the firelight, curving down like twin ivory scythes. Its fur is thick, matted with dust and blood. Its shoulders roll with unnatural grace. Every step a controlled explosion of muscle and intent. It is beauty and terror, wrapped in silence. 600 pounds of predatory perfection, built by evolution not just to kill, but to dominate. You've heard stories, everyone has, how one swipe can break a man's spine, how its bite slides between vertebrae like a blade through fruit. You've seen bones, crushed, punctured, left to rot on game trails. And now it's here, but no one runs, no one screams. Instead, something ancient stirs, not fear but memory, drilled into your bones, passed down through firelit stories and blood-earned lessons. Your people move, not chaotically precisely. The strongest step forward, forming a wall of spears, blades angled out, backs straight. The fire's reflection dances on their weapons like liquid flame. Others grab branches from the edge of the fire, the ends still burning. They wave them in slow arcs, making light and smoke dance across the clearing. The elders pull the children close, shielding them with cloaks and arms. Eyes scan the darkness. Everyone has a role. Everyone knows what to do. This isn't panic. It's choreography, refined through generations of encounters. A living code written in fire, ash, and instinct. The cat circles. Its massive paws pad silently across stone. Nostrils flare, taking in the scent of sweat, fire, and fear. Its ears twitch. It tests the boundary, steps forward, stops. One paw scratches at the dirt. It growls again, louder this time. You stare into its eyes. And for a moment that stretches like molten glass, the world shrinks. It's just you, the fire, and this thing that should be your executioner. But something is off. Its ears tilt back. Its muscles tighten, not to pounce, but to retreat. It snorts, shows its teeth one last time. And then it turns, melts into the dark it came from, a shadow becoming shadows once again. Gone. You exhale, others do too. It's over. But something inside you knows something just changed, because this time the predator ran from the prey. This moment, quiet, terrifying, and oddly triumphant, happened 15,000 years ago in what we now call California. But it echoes across time like a drumbeat, whispering a truth long buried under layers of history and bone. This wasn't just a moment of survival. It was a moment of transformation. Homo sapiens, fragile, slow, unarmed in the natural order, had stared down one of the most fearsome predators in Earth's history and held the line. How? Not with strength, not with claws, not with speed. With something unseen, something more dangerous than teeth, more enduring than bone. Intelligence. The saber-tooth was evolution's masterpiece, engineered to kill, adapted to ambush, tuned for silence and precision, a biological weapon refined over millions of years. But humans? We were something new, a species that didn't just react, we planned, we remembered, we taught, we worked together. Our strength wasn't in our bodies, but in our minds and in our unity. 1 human with a spear as a snack, 20 humans with spears, fire and a plan. That's an army. The saber-toothed cat didn't retreat because it was weak. It retreated because for the first time the rules had changed. The jungle's logic strength is power. Fangbeat's flesh was crumbling under the weight of a new kind of thinking. You've just witnessed the beginning of a revolution, not of weapons, but of cooperation, of strategy, of conscious intelligence meeting instinct and winning. The camp breathes again. The fire crackles. Someone laughs softly. A branch snaps in the flames. A child asks, "Will it come back?" Maybe. But next time, you'll be ready. Because tonight, the fire didn't just keep the darkness at bay. It announced the arrival of something far more dangerous than a saber-tooth. A species that could think. The apex predator. Now that the fire has quieted and the danger has passed, you can breathe again. But the image lingers. Those fangs. That growl. The way it moved not like an animal, but like a verdict handed down by the wild. You saw it. The Smilodon fatalis. The saber-toothed cat. But what is it really? Strip away the myth. Lay bare the bone beneath the legend. And what you find is not a monster, but a masterpiece. A predator so finely tuned, so exquisitely built for the singular act of killing, that calling it a cat feels almost disrespectful. Begin with the jaw. Modern lions can open their mouths to about 65 degrees, enough to crush throats and snap bones, but Smilodon, its lower jaw dropped to a staggering 110 degrees. That's not an exaggeration. That's physics. Imagine trying to eat with swords strapped to your face. Smilodon didn't just adapt to its weapons, its entire skull structure was re-engineered around them. Special hinge joints allowed the mouth to swing wide like a snake's. The jaw muscles were angled differently, built not for raw force but for control and precision. Because the fangs, those iconic saber teeth, weren't crude tools. They were instruments. 7 inches long, curved, serrated, sharp as obsidian. Their edges weren't for chewing, they were for sliding between vertebrae, into arteries, beneath muscle. The strike wasn't a slash, it was a surgical incision. 1 clean bite to sever blood and breath in a single heartbeat. A lion suffocates its prey. Smilodon switched off the power entirely. But fangs alone don't kill. You need power to deliver them. Enter the front legs. Massive, overbuilt. They look less like a feline's and more like a wrestler's arms, thick with muscle, anchored by reinforced shoulder blades, capable of pinning prey that weighed twice as much as the cat itself. Because Smilodon didn't chase. It waited, hidden behind rocks, in tall grass, silent, invisible, until snap the moment came. 1 leap. 30 feet in a single bound. The front legs would strike first, wrapping, wrestling, dragging down. Then came the bite. The kill had to be fast. Those teeth, for all their beauty, were fragile, thin at the tip, hollow near the base. A single misstrike, a kick from a panicked prey animal, a rib bone in the wrong place, and the tooth could shatter like glass. There were no second chances. A Smilodon with a broken fang didn't eat. It died. This created a paradox. Its greatest weapon was also its greatest weakness. To survive, it had to kill perfectly. No sloppy attacks, no uncertain angles, no prey that fought back hard enough to break the blade. Smilodon wasn't just an apex predator, it was a high-risk, high-reward gambler, and nature had bet everything on those teeth. Now picture its build. Shoulders like anvils, a thick compact torso that housed explosive power, but its back legs, shorter than a modern lion's. Smilodon wasn't designed for endurance chases. It didn't have to be. It was an ambush artist. It didn't run prey down, it appeared next to them. And yet for all its power, speed and precision, it had limits. Its kill range was small, 10 feet at best. It needed the element of surprise. It needed prey that didn't fight back smart. It needed predictability. The animal had to panic, flee, follow its instincts. That was the deal Smilodon made with evolution. And for millions of years it worked. Until it met something new. Something that didn't run. Something that didn't freeze. Something that didn't think like prey at all. Humans. But before we get there, understand just how far Smilodon had come. North America didn't host just one saber-toothed species, it hosted 3. Each one more refined, more dangerous than the last. The lightest was Smilodon gracilis delicate, relatively speaking, still weighed 350 pounds, still more than enough to kill you. Then came Smilodon fatalis, the classic, the icon, the California killer, 600 pounds of muscle, silence and sudden death. And finally, in South America, the monster, Smilodon populator, 900 pounds, 4 feet tall at the shoulder, longer than a grizzly, stronger than anything else on 4 legs. Apex didn't begin to cover it. These weren't lone wanderers either. Fossil beds suggest they hunted in small groups, possibly family units, coordinated, cooperative. This wasn't chaos, this was strategy. Evidence shows they brought down prey far larger than themselves, juvenile mammoths, giant ground sloths, prehistoric bison, and they had the brains for it. Skull scans reveal enlarged frontal lobes, indicators of complex problem solving, not just instinct, not just reflex. Smilodon could learn. It could plan. It could choose how and when to strike. But it couldn't evolve fast enough. Because as dangerous as Smilodon was, it was still bound by the rules of the wild. It couldn't change its body. It couldn't replace its fangs with better ones every generation. It couldn't redesign its limbs. It couldn't teach its cubs new tactics passed down from mistakes. It was biology, fixed, efficient, unchanging. Humans were something else. We weren't stronger. We weren't faster. We didn't have better teeth or claws or reflexes. But we changed. We learned. We communicated. We cooperated. Our weapons evolved faster than theirs ever could. Smilodon's death strike depended on the perfect conditions, the right angle, the right prey response, the absence of fire, the absence of sharp points aimed at its chest. But humans, we brought the fire, we brought the spears, we brought the noise, the smoke, the unpredictable formations, the children trained to scream warnings, the elders who read tracks, the coordinated circle of death that turned hunters into the hunted. And slowly, too slowly for Smilodon to react, the balance shifted. Not because we were fearless, but because we turned our fear into strategy. And all of Smilodon's muscle and speed and silence and fang meant nothing in the face of minds that worked as one. It remained deadly, oh yes. But for the first time in its reign, Smilodon fatalis looked at firelight and heard something unfamiliar. Not the silence of prey, but the voice of resistance. A hopeless match. Let's not pretend. If this were a fair fight, humans wouldn't stand a chance. No claws, no fangs, no armour, no natural weapons of any kind. Naked, Upright, slow, soft-skinned, blunt-fingered. That's how we entered the arena of survival. And on the other side, Smilodon fatalis, a creature sculpted by time and terror. Everything about it was sharpened, stripped, optimized for death. 7-inch fangs, 600 pounds of fury, legs thick with muscle, a body low to the ground, primed to pounce, eyes that could see you in the dark, ears that could hear your breathing, and instincts that never second-guessed the kill. Put the two side by side, it's laughable. One swipe from Smilodon would snap a human ribcage. One bite could silence 3 lives. One leap, and your torch wouldn't matter. The cat was built to erase anything foolish enough to meet its eyes. And yet, here we are, not as blood on the ground, but as the last one standing. How? Let's slow down, strip it to the bone. Start with the body. A human's punch can break a nose, but Smilodon's forelimbs could crack bone on impact. Our legs carry us far, but we can't outrun a predator, not even close. Our hands are clever, but no match for claws the size of carving knives. Our skin, tears like paper, no fur, no hide, no resistance. Even our children are born weak, almost useless. Blind, helpless, dependent for years. Every rule of nature said we should have died out. But we didn't, because the most dangerous muscle we had wasn't in our legs or arms, it was in our heads, the brain. And that changed everything. At just over 3 pounds, it doesn't look like much. Soft, wrinkled, grey, no fangs, no claws, no shine, but packed inside billions of neurons firing across a vast electric web, not just reacting, but remembering, predicting, imagining, and most importantly collaborating. Because one human alone, easy prey, but a dozen humans with a plan, that's something else entirely. Let's break the hopeless match into parts. Smilodon had strength, we had endurance. We couldn't overpower it, but we could outlast it, run it to exhaustion, circle back while it panted in confusion, lay traps where it hunted. Our bodies cooled through sweat. Ours could move through heat while others collapsed. We could walk for hours, days, across open plains, across forests, following tracks that no one else noticed. That wasn't strength, that was patience, and it was deadly. Smilodon had weapons, we had tools. A stick with a sharpened stone? Laughable until it pierced muscle, until it found the space beneath a rib, until it hit an eye. And soon that stick became a spear, then a fire-hardened point, then a weighted throwing weapon, then an atlatl, a spear thrower that doubled the range, then bayous, then traps, then snares. We built our teeth, and they didn't break when we missed. Smilodon had instinct. We had memory. It could react. We could learn where it struck once we wouldn't stand again. We mapped danger. We remembered kills. We passed stories down. One generation saw a cousin fall, the next 10 knew to stay back, to make noise, to watch the wind. You can't evolve a saber-tooth in one lifetime. But we could invent a better weapon tomorrow. Smilodon hunted alone, or maybe in pairs. We hunted as tribes, dozens of minds, dozens of eyes, each with a role, one to distract, one to bait, one to flank, one to kill. And at night we didn't sleep as victims. We kept fires burning, we took shifts, we ringed our children in a wall of watchers. We turned fear into rhythm, into ritual, into culture. We turned it into unity. So yes, on paper it looked hopeless. If you ran into a Smilodon alone in the brush, there was no heroic fight, no chance. Just a final scream and silence. But we didn't fight alone. We never did. And that's what Smilodon, for all its brilliance, could never match. Because evolution had given it tools, but it gave us choices, and we used them. We figured out its weaknesses, that it needed perfect kills, that its teeth were fragile, that it couldn't chase far, that it couldn't adapt tactics as quickly as we could change ours. So we stopped being prey. We stopped running. And the moment that happened truly happened, the saber-tooth was no longer the apex predator. It was a creature of the past, still powerful, still deadly, still feared, but for the first time, it was being studied, anticipated, hunted. The geometry of survival. Close your eyes. Picture the moment. A cold dawn, fog curling low around the ankles, silence so thick it presses against your ears, and then movement. Not a stampede, not thunder, just a single shape sliding through the mist, low to the ground, muscles coiled, fangs gleaming like carved ivory. Smilodon fatalist death on four legs, but this time you're not running, you're not alone, and you're holding something in your hand. A spear, not just a stick, not just a point, but a line of survival. Let's talk about geometry, because out in the wild, survival isn't just blood and muscle, it's angles, distance, timing, reach. A saber-toothed cat needed to close the gap, 10 feet or less. That's all it took. Get within 10 feet and it could end you. But with a spear, you changed the rules. The spear's equation. A human standing still with a spear in hand could strike at 8 feet. A thrown spear, 30 feet. With training, 60. With an atlatl, 100. The numbers started to stack. One predator, 10 feet of kill zone, but now 20 humans, armed, alert, spaced in a ring. That wasn't prey anymore. That was a perimeter. 160 feet of sharp wood and deadly focus. A hedgehog of thinking bipeds. Smilodon didn't understand math, but it understood this. Every approach led to pain. It would prowl the outer edge, sniff the air, circle, flinch at a sudden shout, step forward and fire rushed up from a torch, step back and the circle closed tighter. This wasn't a brawl. This was chess. Muscle meets mind. A saber-tooth had brute force, but humans brought formation. We didn't wait for chaos. We created structure. Every band had a plan. Hunters didn't stand at random. They arranged spears forward. Fire rear, children centered, elders behind watchers. No gaps, no blind spots. It wasn't instinct. It was choreography. Think Roman phalanx, but 20,000 years earlier. And it worked. Because while one spear could miss 10 rarely did, and while Smilodon could maul a single foe, it couldn't solve a wall. Even if it charged, the forward spear line braced. Even if it lunged, the rear line hurled. And even if it wounded one, the rest closed in fast and hard. Survival was now a team sport. The art of distance. Before the spear, we fought at fang range, and we lost. After the spear, we defined the battlefield. Predators thrive in chaos, in close quarters, in moments when prey panics and scatters. But now the battlefield had zones, strike range. 10 feet for the predator, 60 plus feet for the human. Alert range. A cat crouched in the grass, but we had sentries, scouts, ears that heard the hush of breathing, eyes that saw the shift of shadow. Engagement range, no more running, instead a pivot. Form the line, set the spears, shout loud, eyes wide. The cat paused. We didn't. We owned the map. Weapons that taught every spear that shattered in battle taught a lesson. Make the next one harder. Fire harden the tip. Balance the weight, test the throw. Early spears were blunt and heavy. Later ones flew straight and true. Some for throwing, some for thrusting. Some barbed to stay in the wound. Each one born from blood and learning. While Smilodon's fangs stayed the same for 1,000,000 years, our spears changed every season. Biology moves slowly, but technology? It moves like lightning. The real weapon was formation. Let's imagine it again. A cat charges. 10 humans step forward in unison, spears down, braced knees. The cat slows, too many eyes, too many sharp points, too much noise, too much risk. It growls, hesitates, circles again. And still, no break. From behind the line, one hunter steps out, raises a flaming branch, throws it to the cat's feet. It hisses, recoils, because now the predator isn't sure who's hunting whom. Strategy over strength. We couldn't outfight a saber-tooth, so we outthought it. We turned spacing into strength. We made every inch count. 8 feet of spear, 10 feet of muscle, 50 feet of planning, and all of it turned the predator's power into a problem Smilodon was a masterpiece of natural violence. But nature didn't design it for this. For prey that thought in patterns, for prey that could create traps, for prey that fought not just with sticks but with position. It was the beginning of modern tactics, not on paper, not in war colleges, but around ancient fires, in the grass, at the cliff's edge. That's where geometry became a weapon. The saber-tooth had force, we had formation, it had fangs, we had foresight, and slowly, quietly, inevitably the numbers shifted. One predator fell, then another, and another, until fear turned into dominance, and chaos became control. The fire revolution. The darkness used to belong to them, not just the saber-toothed cats, but all the nightwalkers, the stalkers, the creepers, the silent killers. To enter nightfall was to vanish. To lie down was to gamble. To sleep was to risk never waking up. Then one night something changed. Not a roar, not a scream, just a flicker, a soft glow, trembling against the wind, crackling, dancing, alive. Fire. One of our ancestors didn't run from a lightning-struck tree. They reached for it, cradled it, fed it, and brought it home. A circle of light in a world of darkness. For the first time in Earth's history, a prey species carved a safe zone into the night. Where fire burned, predators hesitated. Where flames rose, shadows fled. Humans didn't just build a camp, they drew a line in the dark. A circle of light. A declaration. This far, no farther. Around it they sat, told stories, ate meat, sharpened spears, and just outside that circle in the black beyond, eyes watched, ears twitched, and claws stayed sheathed. Because fire didn't just warm the skin it froze predator instincts. The firewall of the mind. To a Smilodon, fire wasn't a tool. It was an existential threat. Their brains weren't wired for it. Flames didn't make sense. They couldn't be bitten, stalked, or silenced. Fire crackled unpredictably. It moved in rhythms no animal could anticipate. It masked sound, footsteps became ghosts. It muddled scent, smoke turned trails into static. It shattered night vision, their greatest weapon, now betrayed them. And the heat? No fur-covered predator tolerates flame's breath. But humans, we just took one step back. The fire still burned, and we were still watching. Turning fear into tactic. At first, fire was chance, a gift of nature. But soon it became a choice. Then a habit. Then a strategy. They didn't just build one fire. They built many. Not scattered randomly, but placed with precision. Archaeological digs. Kesum Cave. Gesher Benot Yaakov. Wonderwork reveal ancient circles of soot. Multiple fire pits arranged in deliberate arcs. This was no accident. It was defense in depth. Try to circle from behind. Flame. Try to charge from the front. Spears. And more flame. The humans hadn't just found safety. They'd engineered it. The predator's nightmare. Imagine it. You're a Smilodon. Hunger gnaws. You smell roasted meat. You hear laughter. You creep closer. The scent grows stronger. So does the light. But something feels wrong. The fire doesn't move like prey. It shifts and flickers. It crackles and blinds. And beyond it, eyes. Not one, not two, 20, all fixed on you, all armed, all unafraid. You hiss, step back, try again, another fire, another group, same circle, same unity, same flame, and something ancient stirs in your brain. Run. Weaponizing psychology. Fire didn't just drive predators away, it rewrote their instincts. Big cats had evolved to fear wildfire. It meant displacement, chaos, death. Humans hijacked that response. A burning branch waved with purpose, triggered the same fear as Forest Inferno, line of torches, a firestorm in miniature. Prey had learned how to scream. Now Prey had learned to intimidate. We didn't just use fire, we performed it. Smoke, sound, flame, a symphony of terror played for predators. And it worked. Camps became castles. Before fire, night camps were vulnerable clumps of huddled bodies. After fire, they were fortresses. Each fire pit was a wall. Each burning log a sentry. The layout mattered. Not too close to water, predators stalk near streams. Not too deep in forest, flame needed breath. Humans chose high ground, open terrain, lines of sight and clear escape routes, and around each camp rings of noisemakers, dry branches, shells, bone, early warning systems, primitive alarms. If anything crept too close, everyone knew. Even the cats. Portable flame, permanent fear. It didn't stop at campfires. Torch-making debris shows up in the fossil record. Humans didn't just sit beside fire. They carried it. Imagine the terror of a predator watching prey approach with flame in hand. Fire had once been nature's chaos. Now it was human will, a tool, a boundary, a weapon. Suddenly, the night wasn't theirs anymore. It was ours. The first line held. For millions of years, predators ruled the dark, but when fire came, the tides shifted. No longer helpless, no longer scattered. Humanity had found its first weapon, not shaped of stone or bone, but of light and fear. And with it, we claimed something priceless. A future. Because fire did more than defend. It liberated. We could cook, sleep, think, plan, and most of all survive. That was the revolution. No king, no general, just flame. But it changed the balance forever. And the predators? They saw the glow from the hills. They smelled the smoke on the wind. And they knew the prey had lit a match and the age of monsters was ending. The spear evolves. The saber-toothed lunges, a blur of muscle and fang, a predator engineered by nature herself and perfected by millions of years of evolution. But she wasn't ready for this. Not for the line of humans waiting in silence. Not for the angle of their arms. Not for the weapon in their hands. Not for the spear. It looks simple, a long shaft of wood, a stone tip. But in the hands of a thinking mind, it's something else entirely. It's a prophecy of death, a whisper of engineering, a message hurled across time and bone. We won't fight on your terms anymore. The genius. Hidden in simplicity. The first spears weren't thrown. They were stabbed, heavy, blunt-ended, designed for close quarters, something between a weapon and walking stick. But even then, there was thought, hardwood chosen carefully, stones chipped with intention, fire-hardened tips for strength. This wasn't just a stick with a point, it was a choice. The first time humans said, if I must fight, let me reach first. Even in their early form, the spear said, distance matters. The geometry of death. Think of the Smilodon. She gets within 5 feet. You're already dead. Her canines 7 inches long. Her claws retractable razors. She needs just one opening, the system. Now think of the spear. 5 feet, still too close. 7 feet, 8, 10. Now there's a buffer. A wall of reach, a moat made of air and fear. And now it's not just one spear. It's many a ring of humans circling, thrusting, chanting, the saber-toothed circles calculating. But the math never works in her favour, because this is no longer fang versus flesh. It's instinct versus strategy. And instinct is losing. The throw heard across the Pleistocene. Then came the leap forward, a leap not of biology, but of thought. The thrusting spear became the throwing spear. Wood was shaved lighter, balance refined, tips made sharper, narrower, deadlier. Now a human didn't even need to stand and fight. They could throw from distance, test the range, bleed the predator before it even reached them. Suddenly, movement became advantage. Terrain became ally. A human on a ridge-owned spear in hand, a dozen at their feet. The saber-tooth looks up and hesitates. Because that ridge isn't high, it's high ground, a concept no predator had ever understood. The atlatl, evolution by innovation. And just when the predator began adapting, just when the saber-tooth began to inch around the range of thrown spears, humans changed the game again. They didn't grow fangs, they built a machine, a simple one, but devastating, a carved stick, curved just right, gripped behind the throwing spear's base. The atlatl, it's not a weapon, it's a multiplier. Suddenly a human's throwing arm becomes twice as long. A spear flies faster, farther, harder. Now that ridge, it's lethal. Now that human, they can strike from beyond sight. A saber-tooth prepares to pounce, and a spear arrives before she even coils her legs. The math of murder. The Smilodon evolved muscle, massive forelimbs, a skull that could open nearly 120 degrees. She was a masterpiece of predatory design, but she couldn't calculate parabolas. Humans could. They didn't just throw, they aimed. They studied the arc, the wind, the rhythm of the target. One throw missed, two missed. The third hit bone, because this wasn't trial and error, it was data gathering. Every miss was a lesson, every strike a refinement. The Smilodon evolved fangs, humans evolved feedback loops, weapons that remember. A cat is born with instincts. She knows how to stalk, how to pounce. She doesn't learn, she remembers what her genes told her. But the spear? It remembers through hands, through minds, through teaching, fathers showing sons, mothers showing daughters, spearheads shaped from flint, obsidian, bone, weighted shafts, feathered ends for flight correction. Each design passed down, refined, improved, and unlike fangs which die with a cat spears survive, they outlive their makers. They teach the next generation how to survive longer, kill smarter. No animal can compete with weapons that evolve faster than they do. Saber teeth don't adapt. By 12,000 years ago, the saber-toothed cat was fading. The ice was melting. Prey herds were shifting. But worst of all, the rules had changed. No longer did muscle rule, no longer did stealth win. Now there were traps, lines of spearmen, snares, ambushes. The predators who once stalked the shadows were now the hunted, because humans didn't just defend. They pursued with tools, with fire, with plans, and the spear marches. Even as the saber-tooth vanished into extinction, the spear did not. It evolved again into javelins, into composite darts, into arrows flung from Busa, cousin of the atlatl, but faster, quieter, even more precise, and later into bronze, iron, steel, bayonets, ballistics. But the idea remained: let the predator come close and die before it ever reaches you. The battle was never fair. The saber-tooth was never dumb, just outdated, built for a world where prey didn't fight back, where speed and strength won the hunt. But prey had learned to reason, to build, to think in lines, distance, angles, to turn the randomness of nature into the predictability of warfare. The predator came with instinct, the human came with design, and in every match since, design wins. The rise of the camp. It begins with a circle. Not a wall, not a fortress, but a line scratched in the dirt. On one side, humans. On the other, everything else. Predators, weather, darkness, chaos. That line becomes a boundary invisible to the wild but sacred to those within. Because this isn't just where they sleep. This is where they decide to survive. This is the camp. The first perimeter. A saber-tooth cannot fathom boundaries. She knows only territory, defined by scent challenged with fang. But humans, They draw invisible lines and defend them with fire and stone. At first, the camp is modest. A few sleeping hides, a central fire, bones discarded in a single pile. But then stones are arranged, tinder stacked in exact positions, entrances cleared of debris, sharp branches angled outward, just in case. Nothing grand, but deliberate. Because the camp is not made of walls. It's made of choices, and choices are weapons, zones of thought. Soon, the chaos is given structure. The fire isn't placed randomly anymore. Its central, its smoke marks safety, its warmth marks presence. Sleeping spots form in a half circle around it, backs to the embers, faces outward. They do not sleep as animals, they sleep like sentinels. To the west, food is stored, high, away from reach. To the east, waste is carried far from the fire. Children sleep closest to the heat. Hunters sleep at the edge. Everyone knows their place. Not from instinct, but from understanding. This is no longer a gathering. This is a system, jobs without names. They have no written laws, no titles, no formal commands. But they have roles, and roles are stronger than rules. One elder remembers which roots can kill. Another maps the stars. One man throws better than the others, so he teaches. A woman notices the wind before the trees bend, so she guards. The children watch, they copy, they learn. And so the camp doesn't just survive, it remembers. And every day it becomes more than the sum of its parts. Not just a group of humans, but a network of minds, collective intelligence. A single human cannot outrun a saber-tooth, but a camp can outthink one. One person keeps the fire burning, another sharpens spears. Two more listen for sounds beyond the edge. Someone hears a branch snap. They don't scream. They signal. The signal passes quietly. A wave, a hiss, a glance. Weapons shift. Children duck behind hides. The fire is stoked brighter, not for warmth, but for blinding light. They don't run. They wait. Because fear is no longer paralyzing. Fear is part of the plan, and when the saber-tooth emerges from the dark, the camp is ready. The language of layout. The camp is not accidental. Its shape says something. It says, here is warmth. Here is vision. Here is a line you do not cross. To animals, it's a threat. To others of their kind, it's a message. You are welcome, but know your role. This is early urban planning without concrete, without maps. A layout built on memory and utility. Space is no longer just where they exist. It's where they think, where they plan, where they build tomorrow. They became the architects of the night. Every night nature sends the same message. Out here, everything dies. But humans... Not us. Not tonight. The stars blink cold above. The trees whisper rumours of movement. But inside the camp, order. You can hear it in the rhythm of speech, the clatter of stone on stone, the soft hum of a lullaby. Predators may roam, but they hesitate near this glowing island. Because something lives here that doesn't belong to the wild anymore. Pattern. And pattern is power. Planning is a weapon. A saber-tooth kills with muscle. A human kills with foresight. The camp is proof of that. The night is no longer chaos. It's scheduled. Who watches the fire? Who sleeps first? When to check the meat? Where to stash the spears? And the next morning? The camp moves, but the pattern goes with them. Rebuilt, refined, expanded. Over time, some camps stay longer. Seasons pass, footpaths harden. Shelters become semi-permanent. The wild doesn't retreat, but it changes course. Because this clearing isn't just occupied. It's defended by ideas. The home that hunts back. The predator stalks from instinct. She knows nothing else. But this place. This camp. It stalks back with traps hidden beneath leaves, with pits dug near trails, with signals that travel faster than any paw. A single person with a spear is prey. But a camp? A camp is a machine. It hums with knowledge. It bleeds coordination. It is still, and then, suddenly, deadly. It does not fear the dark. It shapes it. The invention of safety. Safety didn't exist in nature. It had to be invented. And humans did. Not with walls, not with brute strength, but with shared attention, spatial memory, silent cooperation. They built something no predator could understand, a zone where chaos was not allowed, where each noise meant something, each position had a reason, each person had a task. The camp was never still. Even when it looked quiet, it watched. Because humans realize something critical, you don't need to be stronger than the threat. You just need to organize faster. From camp to civilization. The camp was the first blueprint. Everything else followed. Villages, towns, cities, nations. But it started here. With one fire. With one circle of minds. With one night where no one ran. And in that firelight, a new predator was born, not a beast of tooth and claw, but of vision, patience, and memory. The animal psychologists. It starts with stillness. A quiet crouch, eyes narrowed, breath held, not in fear, not in awe, but in observation. Long before science had a name, before formulas, microscopes, and charts, humans practiced a deeper kind of knowing. They studied the world not from a distance, but from within it. And in this chapter of survival, they fixed their gaze on the most dangerous thing around. Smilodon fatalis. Knowing the predator. Most creatures flee from what they fear, but humans, they stalk their stalkers. They notice the patterns others miss, that the saber-toothed does not attack randomly, that she does not hunt every night, that she favors the shadows just before dawn and retreats when the air grows too warm. Where others see a monster, humans see a system. They watch, they wait, they learn, because they understand something the rest of the animal kingdom does not. If you can map a creature's mind, you can predict its teeth, territory, lines unseen. The saber-tooth is a nomad, but not a wanderer. She roams with purpose, following invisible boundaries marked in scent and scratch. To the human eye, these are just trees, rocks, soil. But to those who watch carefully, a pattern emerges. She circles the same grove every third day, marks a log with urine, rubs her face against stone. Humans take note, and suddenly a clearing once considered safe is understood to be a crossroads of death. They shift their camps, adjust their fire placements, post guards where the saber-tooth is most likely to reappear. This isn't luck. This is early field work. The first ethologists. Long before textbooks, there were trackers. They read footprints like paragraphs, broken branches like exclamation points, claw marks like maps. One learns that a fresh scent means the cat passed within hours. Another learns that the stillness of birds signals danger nearby. Someone else notices that when the wind changes, so does the rhythm of the forest. They don't write these things down. They pass them by firelight, through whispered stories, through demonstration. Knowledge becomes tradition. Tradition becomes instinct. An instinct shaped by thought becomes strategy. The Denning cycle. It's a discovery that changes everything. The saber-tooth has a rhythm, a time when she's more aggressive, a time when she avoids risk, and then a time when she disappears. A young hunter follows claw prints deep into a ravine. There, beneath overhang and thorn bush, he sees something miraculous. Not one saber-tooth, but 3 are cubs, still blind, still fumbling. One is the mother, lean, wary, motionless. He doesn't run. He remembers, he marks the location with stones, returns with elders. They do not attack, they do not disturb. They simply record this predator has a cycle, a time when she dens, when she is vulnerable. And for the first time, humans know, even the deadliest beast must stop to rest. Fear replaced with curiosity. The camp is buzzing, not with terror, but with ideas. Children carve fangs into sticks, not as warnings, but as models. Elders draw lines in the dirt showing paths of movement. The tribe begins to speak of the cat not just as a killer, but as a creature it eats. It sleeps, it breeds, it thinks, and anything that thinks can be understood, they begin to mimic its voice, copy its stalking gait, guess where it will move next based on sun and shadow. This is not worship. This is analysis. Behavior becomes blueprint. Once humans only reacted. Now they anticipate. If the wind is strong and westward, they know the saber-tooth will approach from the ridge. If game disappears from the riverbanks, they know a predator is already hunting there. They begin to set traps not where the cat is, but where it will be. They place obstacles near denning sites not to attack, but to force migration. They leave markers soaked in human scent, tricking the cat into thinking territory is claimed, not brute force, not raw speed, but behavioral prediction. The first experiments run in blood and breath. The mind is a mirror. One day, a girl follows a trail too far. She finds herself in tall grass, cut off from the rest, and there, just ahead, a saber-tooth emerges. But she does not scream. She does not run. She freezes. She remembers the stories, that the cat doesn't charge prey that hasn't moved, that eye contact confuses it, that sudden movement triggers the chase. So she does nothing. She stares. She breathes, slow and steady. The cat steps closer and then turns away. Not because she's brave, but because she understood the script, the rules of the mind behind the fangs. The predator's blind spot. The saber-tooth cannot change. It is perfect for one thing, ambush. It knows how to strike, how to kill, how to disappear. But it does not know how to adapt. Humans do. Each lesson becomes a layer of caution, of anticipation, of psychological warfare. They use mimicry, noise manipulation, lures made from bones and hide. They learn what makes the saber-tooth retreat, what makes it hesitate. And they use that hesitation like a dagger, because the moment a predator starts to second-guess, it's no longer the apex, the birth of behavioral warfare. This isn't just survival anymore. It's study, it's theory, it's trial and error. They test, they adapt. They remember a child who saw a saber-tooth near water learns not to fish alone. A scout who tracked one in silence passes on hand signals that save lives. Each person becomes a data point. Each night by the fire is a symposium. This is how science was born. Not in labs, but in watching what kills you and asking why. From fear to mastery. The saber-tooth still prowls the forest, still sharp, still silent. But the humans are no longer afraid. They are prepared. Because they did what no beast could do. They asked questions and waited for the answers. They used the mind not just to survive, but to decode the very laws of predation. And in doing so, they became something new. Not just prey, not just tribe, but scientists of the savage world. The weaponized landscape. The sun dips behind the ridge, casting long shadows across stone and grass. Somewhere in that darkening valley, a predator breathes slow, calculating. But the camp above does not flinch. No screams, no panic, only torches, only watchful eyes, only the land itself bent to human will. They did not build cities, not yet, but they built something else, a strategy drawn in rock and fire. The cliff's edge. They used to sleep on open ground, on riverbanks and meadows where moonlight painted their bodies like invitations to the hunt. But that changed when they climbed. The cliff is more than high ground. It is advantage. It is warning. One way up, one way down. and eyes that see everything. The saber-tooth does not like to climb, its weight is its weakness. Its power lies in flat ambush, not vertical pursuit. Humans saw this, and so they rose. The camper's fortress. No walls, no gates. Just cleverness. Boulders arranged, not for shelter but for sound, wind funneled through cracks and hollows, creating eerie howls in the night sounds that confuse predators, make them hesitate. Stones clack underfoot in deliberate paths warning signs that something approaches. They leave dry twigs in the grass. Noisemakers woven from reed and bone. A saber-tooth steps forward, crack, clack. The camp awakens. No ambush tonight. The fire circle. It's not just heat. It's not just light. It's a psychological perimeter, flames in a ring, flickering, dancing, swaying like spirits. Every few yards another fire, each carefully spaced. Not for warmth. For control, predators see not one fire but a field of danger. They don't know how many humans there are. They don't know where the gaps lie. That uncertainty is the weapon. A torch is waved. A spark flies into the wind, and somewhere unseen in the dark, claws retreat into the forest. Pathways with purpose. The land isn't random anymore. It's engineered escape routes marked in stones, elevation maps carved in memory. If attacked, the young know to run left, the elders know to scatter wide, the strongest know where the bottlenecks are. This isn't panic, it's choreography. The terrain dances to human rhythm even when blood stains the soil. Noise traps. It starts as a joke. Children tie bones to vines, let them rattle in the wind. Then one night a cat approaches, and the bones click like teeth. The cat freezes, listens, then disappears into the dark. By morning every camp has them bone alarms placed in the trees, set to whisper warnings at the slightest motion. Later they add shells, then dry leaves, then carved stones that whistle when spun. Primitive? Yes. But also effective because sound is fear and fear is power. Topography as tactic. They do not just survive in the landscape, they shape it. A shallow trench becomes a blind. A riverbank becomes a funnel. A thorn thicket is cut just swallowing humans through, but not predators. They guide prey into ravines. They herd danger away from sleeping zones. What was once chaos now functions like a battlefield, and the generals, barefoot, smoke-smeared, holding spears and strategies in equal measure. The Hill of Bones. One site becomes sacred, not for its spirits, but for its message. At the foot of a ridge, they leave the skulls of defeated predators, arranged, stacked, marked with ash. To humans its memory, to animals its warning. A saber-tooth once crept near, sniffed at the scattered remains of its kin and walked away. It doesn't understand ritual, but it understands danger. And now the land speaks that language. The map in the mind. There is no parchment, no ink, no scale, but the map exists, in stories told to children, in gestures drawn in sand, in the placement of stones that only the tribe can decode. A certain crooked tree means watch here. A forked branch signals predator path. A line of darkened soil? Do not cross. They carry the land inside them. And as the years pass, the map grows more complex, more layered, more tactical. The terrain becomes memory, and memory becomes survival. Prehistoric war rooms. At night around the fire, they don't just tell stories, they plan. A grandfather points to the stars, describing a hunting ground beyond the ridge. A scout draws with charcoal on stone, outlining the saber-tooth's likely return path. They adjust sleeping positions, move the food cache, reassign watchers to higher ground. No one wears armor, no one carries a title. But this is war, and this is command. The landscape learns too. It isn't static. The cliffs erode, the forest changes, water shifts course. But the humans evolve with it. They rebuild, they relearn. And each change becomes a new opportunity. A fallen tree becomes a barricade. A floodplain becomes a mirror trap for predators at dusk. A sudden rock slide becomes a natural corral for large game. The land is not their enemy anymore. It is their co-conspirator, not just survival domination. This chapter is not about hiding. It is about reshaping, about looking at the world not as something to endure, but something to bend. The saber-tooth has muscle, claws, speed. But it hunts in a world that no longer belongs to it, because when terrain itself becomes a weapon, when valleys deceive and ridges whisper, even fangs must think twice. The silent blueprint of power. No ruins remain, no stone castles, no written battle plans, but their mastery is still therein, the bones buried by cliffs, in the fire-scorched circles that dot the earth, in the very layout of our ancient camps. They turned nature's raw fury into architecture, transformed fear into formation. They were not builders of cities, they were engineers of survival. And in doing so, they changed the rules of life itself. The 10,000-year war. It didn't begin with a roar. It didn't begin with a spear. It began in the silence between a shadow at the edge of firelight, a set of tracks too fresh near the kill site, a tension strung tight as sinew under frost. This was not a war of battles. It was a war of presence two species, both hungry, both intelligent, and neither willing to vanish. Seasonal boundaries. Winter makes everyone honest. When the snows came, the saber-tooths migrated south. Following herds of bison and ancient deer, humans watched them go, marked their paths, noted where they denned, where they gave birth, where the land itself softened under their absence. But come spring they returned. Always the same pattern, always the same tension, like thunderclouds and fire, always circling, always just one mistake away from an explosion. The unspoken pact. The saber-tooth did not love confrontation. It loved the ambush, the silence, the single clean kill. So did the humans. Both preferred to strike unseen. Both knew the cost of injury, and so, through years that became centuries, a strange truce formed in blood and instinct. A herd would fall. Humans would scavenge the west flank. The saber-tooth would drag its kill eastward. Lines drawn in dust. Rules whispered in muscle memory. Sometimes broken. Always remembered. Shared prey, shared risk. They both hunted the same game. The mammoth, the bison, the giant elk. Each kill was a treasure trove meat. Sinew, hide, marrow. But the cost was high. When humans stumbled on a fresh saber-tooth kill, they studied it like a battlefield. Where were the drag marks? Where was the den? Was the predator nearby or waiting? Sometimes they stole. Sometimes they paid in blood. A young hunter once reached for a haunch still warm with steam, only to hear a growl behind him as deep as the earth's own throat. He never moved again. They buried him with fire and songs, and next time they waited. Adaptation on both sides. This was not a static war. This was evolution in motion. Humans began to track not just the prey but the predators. They knew the sound of saber-tooth cubs, the rhythm of a stalking gate. They smelled the scent markings on rocks and answered with smoke and ash. Meanwhile, the cats learned too. They shifted their hunting times, moved camps to higher ground, began circling fires from downwind. One elder said, "The cat is watching us the way we watch it." And he was right. The cost of boldness. With every season, human camps grew larger. More children, more food, more firelight, and more confidence. They stopped migrating as often. They built more permanent shelters. They stored meat, dug pits, created traps, and in doing so they made themselves easier to find. Saber-Tooths tested the perimeters, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs. They would skirt the shadows, circle the scent of roasted meat, and vanish before dawn. Until one night a young female breached the circle. She leapt over the fireline, killed 2, and was speared mid-roar. It took 10 men to bring her down. The next night, the cats did not come. They remembered. The long memory. The war had no victor, only memories. Children were raised with stories not just of ancestors, but of enemies. They were taught how to spot a saber-tooth's tail before its eyes, how to move without sound, how to turn fire into a wall. The saber-tooths in turn taught their cubs where the humans lived, how to smell ash in the wind, how to recognize a spear's glint in the moonlight. For 10,000 years they coexisted not in peace but in understanding. Escalation in the shadows. At times the balance tipped. A harsh winter, a failed hunt, a fire that swept through too much forest. Desperation made both sides reckless. Humans hunted deeper into predator territory. Saber-tooths raided sleeping camps. The conflict wasn't just survival anymore. It was domination. Who owned the forest? Who ruled the steppe? Who had the final say in the law of tooth and fire? The answer changed with each generation, when the saber-tooth adapted too slowly. But evolution is not fair. Humans changed faster. They built new tools, shaped stone with purpose, tied blades to shafts, invented the atlatl. They began to hunt smarter from farther with more precision. The saber-tooth's fangs remained the same, beautiful, deadly, and now predictable. It had no spear, no torch, no map of the terrain etched in stories. It was a masterpiece of nature. But nature had moved on. The last years of the war. The end did not come with a roar. It came quietly. The cats became rarer, their dens abandoned, their tracks fewer with each season. Humans still told the stories, still trained for the encounter, still kept fires high on cliff camps, and no glowing eyes stared back anymore. The war had ended, not with a treaty, not with conquest, but with absence, legacy of a predator. And yet even now, in the crackle of fire, in the whisper of grass at night, something lingers. The memory of an enemy that was never evil, only equal, only hungry, only trying, like us, to carve a life from a cruel world. Their bones lie beneath the earth, our stories rise above it. But the war changed both sides. It gave us fear. It gave us courage. It gave us a reason to think not just about how to survive, but how to outthink something faster, stronger, deadlier. In that 10,000-year war, we became more than prey. We became human, from prey to hunter. There comes a moment in every long war when the hunted stops running. It does not happen in a single night, or with a single blow. It builds quiet and slow, like the gathering weight of snow on the branch of a pine, until suddenly, silently, everything shifts. For thousands of years humans had watched the saber-toothed cat from the edge of firelight, revered it, feared it, named it in stories not as animal but as force, a spirit of the dark, a whisper in the grass, the silent end to a careless footstep. But then the bones began to tell a different story. In the dry rock shelters of South America, in the sun-baked soils of the Great Plains, archaeologists found ribs with flake marks, skulls cracked at the base, femurs split for marrow. These were not the spoils of scavengers. They were the work of human hands, sharp, deliberate, practiced. The prey had turned. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't revenge. It was necessity. A saber-tooth's hide was thick and warm, an armoured coat against Ice Age nights. Its meat, though lean, could feed a camp for days. Its fangs, once symbols of death, became tools, ornaments, trophies that hung from necks or doorposts, warnings to all who entered. We are not afraid anymore. But how? How did the weakest species on the plain, with no claws, no teeth, no speed, no muscle, rise up to challenge the apex killer? The answer, as always, was in the mind. To hunt a predator is not the same as hunting prey. It is a dance with danger, a test of timing and nerve. You must think not only where the cat is, but where it will be. You must become the terrain, become the wind, learn its habits not as facts but as rhythm. And humans, now armed with millennia of observation, had become masters of rhythm. They watched cats follow prey trails, saw how they returned to old dens, measured their movements by moonlight. They learned that the saber-tooth did not like risk, that it preferred the old kill sites, that it trusted the scent of its own kind. So they baited them, left carcasses arranged just wrong, burned hides in specific places, recreated the scent of territory to funnel movement toward waiting traps. A pit dug in silence, a circle of thorns, a ring of stone with smoke seeping through a clever vent. Tools, not brute force, strategy, not rage. They hunted not with speed, but with patience. And when the cat stepped into the snare, into the narrowed passage, into the waiting shadows, they struck, not once, not in anger, again and again from multiple sides, with distant spears and stone blades and firebrand distractions. It was not a duel, it was a convergence. And still, even then, it could go wrong. There are stories passed in bones-crushed rib cages that suggest a final charge. A shattered skull that hints at a kill made too close. Teeth marks on femurs that do not match post-mortem chewing, but a fight that spilled in both directions. They did not always win, but they no longer always lost. Evidence in isotope analysis showed a shift in diet. In some regions, humans began consuming more meat from apex predators, a reversal of the food chain that echoed something fundamental. They were no longer just part of the system, they were bending it. And yet, for all their growing power, it was never just about dominance. There is something sacred in hunting a creature that once defined your fear. Many of the sites where saber-tooth bones are found alongside human tools show signs of ritual, painted stones, carved bones, arranged teeth in careful rows. To hunt a god is to inherit its legacy. In the caves, there are paintings, not of victory but of transformation. A human with cat teeth, a cat with fire behind its eyes, figures standing at the edge of comprehension, blending predator and prey into one shape. What the saber-tooth taught us in fear, we returned in skill. By the time the cat population declined, whether from climate, prey loss, or our encroachment, it was not because they were weak. They were still strong, still dangerous, still perfect in the shape nature had given them. But nature had changed the rules, and so had we. In the end, the humans did not outmuscle the saber-tooth. They outweighted it, outwatched it, outthought it. They hunted with maps in their minds, with tools passed from generation to generation, with tactics refined by firelight whispers and bone-scraped lessons. They had once built fire to keep the predator out. Now they stalked it through its own shadows, from prey to hunter, not because they stopped fearing, but because they learned to understand, and in that understanding they found power. The saber-tooth was no longer the final chapter in the night. It became part of the beginning of human mastery the moment we looked into the eyes of our greatest predator and saw ourselves looking back. The predator's weakness. Not all power is invincible. Some power is brittle, magnificent, terrifying, yet doomed by its own design. The saber-tooth was forged by evolution to be a killer. Every inch of its body, from the explosive muscles in its shoulders to the dagger-length canines that curved from its skull like ivory scythes screamed dominance. To see one emerge from the brush was to see death walking. But in the long stare of survival, perfection is not enough, because even the sharpest blade has a breaking point, and the humans found it. The great fangs, those iconic weapons that made Smilodon Fatalis a legend, were both its strength and its curse. Nearly a foot long, hollow-rooted, fragile under pressure, they were designed not to crush or gnaw, but to puncture soft tissue with surgical precision. The throat of a prey animal, the windpipe, the arteries. But that required one thing: control. The saber-tooth needed to bring its prey down first to hold it still, to press with the forelimbs, to make the body quiet before driving the fatal strike. It could not afford to miss. It could not afford chaos. And so, when humans brought chaos, it hesitated. That hesitation, that half-second of recalculating was enough. The humans had learned where to strike. Not wildly, not at the chest, where the bones were thick, not at the mouth, where a single mistimed move could shatter a spear or draw death. They aimed low for the soft underbelly when the cat reared, for the leg joints when it charged, for the side of the ribs, just behind the shoulder, where a well-placed thrust could slip between ribs and pierce the lung. One breath in, and blood would flood the predator's chest. 2 breaths and it would falter. 3, and the earth would claim it. And if the first spear didn't bring it down, the second did, or the third, or the 7th, because humans had learned not just to fight, but to surround, to come not from one angle, but from many, to let the terrain collapse the cat's choices until the only path left was forward into a trap. And when it leapt forward, full of fury, the very thing that made it deadly worked against it. The long fangs, so perfect for the still kill, were a liability in motion. Too long to bite in a tangle, too delicate for close quarters. In the frenzy of a skirmish, the cat could not use them freely. If they broke, the cat died. The saber-tooth needed precision, but humans did not give it that luxury. They brought fire and noise and movement. They lured it onto slick rock or toward thorns. They baited it with fresh blood, waited in pits, in ravines behind ridges. They changed the battlefield until the perfect predator became clumsy, cornered and blind. The cat still fought back. Its still tore limbs, crushed skulls, scattered the bold-hearted. But the pattern was shifting. In the fossil record, we see evidence of it healed punctures in Smilodon bones, suggesting failed hunts, fractured canine tips, scapulas cracked, not by prey, but by spear or stone. Injuries that tell a story of an apex predator not just dying but being bested. Time and again. And over time the hesitation became more costly. Because now every miscalculation meant not just hunger but an ambush. A circle of spears, firelight closing in. It is a strange thing to watch the fall of a god. The saber-tooth had ruled unchallenged for millennia, from Argentina to Alaska. Its roar once made mammoths turn and run, but now, in the shadows of fire and planning, it faced a species that could exploit the very flaw in its majesty. We did not grow bigger. We grew smarter. And in our minds we mapped the predator's body like a battlefield: lungs, joints, eyes, ribs. We studied where the fur thinned. We watched where the skin stretched tight when it pounced. And when the moment came, we did not flinch, because fragility, once known, is power. We began to teach it not just to our kin, but to the bones we left behind. The marks of butchery changed, cleaner, more efficient. Spearheads grew longer, narrower shaped not for deer, but for deep, soft drives. The predator's body became an instruction manual, its death a lesson plan. We wore the hides with reverence, painted the fangs with ochre, carried the claws not as trophies but as reminders, Even the mighty can fall, but not from hate, from knowledge. That was the true turning point. We did not hate the saber-tooth. We feared it. We honoured it. We outgrew it. And in doing so, we learned perhaps the most enduring lesson of survival. That no creature, no matter how strong, is above strategy. The saber-tooth was never weak. We simply became better at recognising its blind spots. In those long nights beside the fire, as the old ones told stories of the cat who ruled the valley, the younger ones listened with a mix of dread and pride. They did not cheer its death. They respected the path it carved and the shadow it cast, because in that shadow humanity sharpened its mind. And when the light finally reached the edges of that fear, the predator blinked. And we did not. Psychological warfare. Before the spear, before the trap, before even the flame, there was fear. And in that fear, first shared in silence between trembling humans in the tall grass, hearts pounding as the shadows moved, there bloomed something unexpected. Understanding. Because to survive the saber-tooth, humans could not just study its body, they had to know it. Not as myth, but as mind. They had to see the world as it saw it, to think as it thought, to break it, not with strength, but with uncertainty. And that is where the war turned strange. We began to fight the predator's confidence. We turned its instincts against it. Because a predator like Smilodon didn't kill with anger, it killed with certainty. It relied on rhythm, territory, scent, routine. It hunted in patterns carved deep into muscle memory by generations of success. Like all apex killers, it was not reckless. It was methodical, which meant it could be unravelled. It started small. Scent. Every step a saber-tooth took was guided by the invisible map of smells, the urine of rivals, the blood of prey, the dry scent of humans. It knew where it was safe, where danger lay, where dinner might bolt. And so the humans began to tamper. They smeared crushed plants across their skins, masked their scent with mud and mammoth fat, left false trails, urine from prey animals collected in containers of hide, trickled along paths that led to sheer cliffs or noise traps. They moved bones from one kill site to another, hung entrails in trees, marked rocks with the scent of animals that had never lived in that valley. And the cat, confused, slowed down. Every pause was a crack in its rhythm, every delay a chink in the armour of instinct. The humans pressed deeper. They observed more closely, learned that saber-tooths preferred to ambush from certain angles, that they approached kill sites at particular hours, that they patrolled routes between known water sources and prey herds. So the humans changed the map. They dug small ditches across the cat's favoured approach, filled them with sharp sticks or fire-hardened bones. They stacked thorn bushes in narrow passes, left behind piles of dung from rival predators. They made the cat feel watched, because fear, when planted in a predator, grows fast. Smilodon had never been prey. It had no training in being hunted, but now it felt it. The wind changed, and it could no longer tell if the scent it followed was prey, bait, or trap. It stepped into clearings once familiar, and something was different. No birds, no wind, a silence that pressed against its ribs. The humans began to leave behind noise, bones tied to vines that rattled when touched, hollowed logs that moaned in the wind, fire pits built with no intention to cook, only to glow and confuse. The saber-tooth, whose world had once been ordered and predatory, now found itself inside a labyrinth of madness. It became hesitant. And hesitation, for a predator, is a sentence. A nervous predator makes mistakes. It pulls back too soon. It overcommits. It flinches. And in those small fractures of confidence, the humans moved like shadow and fire. They began to walk boldly through areas they once feared, spears out, eyes sharp, leaving messages in rock and bone that said, "We are here and we are watching you too." It wasn't just physical warfare. It was psychological siege. Not in a day, not in a year, but across generations. Children were raised not to fear the saber-tooth blindly, but to understand how to unbalance it. They were taught the rhythm of its breath, the pause before its pounce, the narrow wedge of time between its first step and final leap. They were taught, make it doubt. Because a doubting cat doesn't lunge, a doubting cat lingers, and in that hesitation it dies. Evidence of this mental chess game can still be found. In ancient kill sites, we find carcasses of Smilodon with no signs of struggle. No flailing, no shattered bones. Just clean spear thrusts, ambushes, precision. This was not brute combat. This was execution. And it came not from a place of dominance, but from intellect. From humans turning the saber-tooth's mind into a weapon against itself. We see it in cave art too. Not just depictions of the hunt, but scenes of confusion, of cats cornered by light, of trickery. We see depictions of human figures wearing masks of animals, deceiving both prey and predator. The humans became actors in a theatre of survival. Sometimes they mimicked the scents of other predators to ward the cats away. Sometimes they mimicked prey sounds to lure them in. And always they remained unpredictable. That was the key. The saber-tooth was a creature of consistency. The humans were creatures of chaos. And from that chaos came power. One tale from oral traditions long buried in bones and whispered through ancient dust suggests that entire camps were sometimes abandoned, not because of danger, but to create confusion. The fire pits left burning, the meat left exposed. The cats would arrive, smell the unnatural quiet, and freeze. It didn't make sense. And in that dissonance, in that break in the expected, they faltered. It is easy to see warfare as violence. But sometimes it is silence. It is the quiet move that rattles the mind. It is not the spear in the ribs, but the question before it. Why is this too easy? Why is there no wind? Why do I feel watched? Those were the new weapons. And perhaps they were more lethal than any blade. In the end, the war between human and saber-tooth wasn't just fought with spears or fire. It was fought in the predator's mind. And there we planted doubt. And doubt grew like wildfire. Tactical evolution. It began with a stick. Just a stick. Sharpened at one end, burned at the tip. A child's idea of defense. A trembling human's last hope against the dark. But the stick became a spear. The spear became many, and the hands that held them stopped shaking. Because something was changing. Tools were no longer just extensions of the body. They were becoming language, becoming strategy, becoming tactics. And with each generation, the wild energy of survival, the chaos of fight or flight, hardened into pattern, into shape, into formation. From defense came offense. And the prey began to hunt back. We often imagine prehistoric man as disorganized, a swarm of grunts and wild thrusts. But the truth, buried beneath the ashen bone, tells another story. One of choreography, one of coordination, one of evolution, not of muscle or teeth, but of thought. Because weapons are only as powerful as the mind that wields them, and the human mind, it had begun to plan. We start with the thrusting spear, the old companion of early man. It was short, heavy, designed for up-close conflict, for desperate lunges at a predator already too close. But soon it wasn't used alone. The front line would carry thrusting spears like pikes, anchored deep, angled low, forming a jagged wall of points. Behind them, others carried javelins, longer, lighter, balanced for flight. Now, There was a rhythm, a dance of distance. When the saber-tooth charged, it met a barricade of spears held like roots in the earth. If it paused, if it circled, it was pelted from afar by hunters who moved like the wind, vanishing between throws, returning with more. The predators used to single prey fleeing in panic now faced formations, not soldiers perhaps, not yet, but something close, something new. There were barbed spears too, rough and wicked, not meant to kill quickly but to wound, to lodge into muscle and stay. They were designed with understanding, not just of anatomy but of psychology. A barbed wound bled, it burned, it slowed. A saber-tooth with a barbed spear in its flank would limp for days, dragging the memory of the humans with it. And in that limp was more than pain. There was hesitation, there was fear. And the humans? They watched, they learned, they remembered. No longer did they scatter when a predator was near. They grouped, they took positions, they gave signals with whistles, hand waves, bird calls. They took from the land not just meat and wood, but geometry. They began to think in circles, in cones, in kill zones. This was no longer a loose alliance of survivors. This was a formation, sometimes 5, sometimes 10, sometimes 20. Each with a role, each with a range. And when they moved like the tide, drawing in, crashing forward, retreating before the final strike. The pike became a symbol of this new era, long, heavy, almost unwieldy. But when set into the ground at the right angle, when timed with the approach of a charging predator, it became a wall, an answer to the fang. It wasn't just weaponry, it was placement, it was timing. The camp was no longer a loose scattering of fires. It had boundaries, it had sectors. Some areas for cooking, some for sleeping. Some, always reserved for fighting. Spear racks were built, lookouts appointed. When the night fell and the growls came from the tree line, no one panicked, everyone moved. Because tactics were not just for the wilds anymore. They had come home. We see it in the bones, saber-tooths with deep puncture wounds from multiple angles. Not a lucky blow, but a coordinated strike. We see it in the footprints left behind in hardened mud. Semicircular patterns, spaced out evenly, like men bracing, waiting. We see it in art. Figures holding spears not randomly but uniformly humans drawn not as individuals, but as lines, as walls. This wasn't just survival, it was strategy. And as the weapons advanced, so did the plans. The atlatl had already changed the battlefield, but when used in tandem with close-range defenders, it became something far more powerful, a ranged vanguard, a mobile artillery behind a wall of flesh and bone. The saber-tooth, for all its muscle, could not counter this. It couldn't flank them, because there were scouts. It couldn't stampede through, because the front line was braced. It couldn't outlast them, because the humans no longer rushed. They waited. They wore it down, and when it lunged, as it always did, certain it could break the line the humans pivoted, they opened a gap, let it charge in, let it overextend, and then they closed. Spears from both sides, from the front, from the back. There was no escape, because now the humans didn't just have weapons, they had tactics, and tactics win wars. The saber-tooth wasn't defeated in one grand battle. It was outmaneuvered across centuries, in every failed ambush, in every hesitant step, in every wound that festered, every camp it circled but could not breach. Humans rewrote the rules. Where once there was instinct, there was now organization. Where once there was fear, there was now confidence. And where once there was chaos, there was formation. Tools became tactics. Weapons became war plans. And in the long war for survival, the brain, not the claw, would prove mightier. Know your monster. The fire crackled low. Ash whispered in the wind, and on the edge of the clearing a shape moved, too low for a bear, too heavy for a wolf. Not all saber-toothed cats were the same. Some stalked silently, others crashed through underbrush like thunder. Some fought alone, others moved with eerie coordination, 2 or 3 shadows at once. The mistake was thinking they were one monster. They were many. Different species, different instincts, different weapons of bone and muscle, and if humans were to survive, they had to know their monster. This was not just fear. This was study. This was science before the word existed. It began with observation. Footprints pressed into damp clay told of weight. Claw spacing told of stride. Tooth marks on bone told of bite mechanics. And slowly a mental catalogue formed, passed from hunter to hunter, clan to clan. Not all saber-tooths were equal. Some were worse. Smilodon gracilis was the first, the ghost, the ancestor, sleeker, smaller, but no less deadly. It moved fast, almost like a modern cat, low to the ground, agile in ambush. Gracilis didn't break bones, it cut flesh. Its fangs were thinner, more like knives than daggers, and it preferred the dense forests, where trees crowded and shadows never fully lifted. Humans in those regions learned differently. You couldn't rely on wide sight lines, so they used sound, clay pots filled with pebbles, hung on branches. A moving predator would rattle the trap before it could pounce. They built narrow corridors of thorn and stone, forcing the gracilis to reveal itself if it approached. And when they fought back, they aimed low. The smaller frame meant a lighter build, easier to trip, easier to trap. But gracilis was only the beginning, because in the open lands something else hunted, something heavier, something crueler. Smilodon fatalis, the namesake, the apex. It was not just a predator, it was a weapon shaped by evolution, stocky, massive forelimbs. It didn't chase its prey, it crashed into it. Fatalis broke bones before it bit. Its bite was strange, not strong like a hyena's, but precise. The wide gape of its jaw, the scissor of its upper and lower canines, it pierced the neck, the windpipe, the arteries, kill or die. That was its gamble, one strike or nothing. The humans that shared its range understood its pattern. Fatalis was bold but not foolish. It attacked when it knew the odds. So the humans lied. They built false camps, empty rings of firelight with bone dummies wrapped in fur. They left food out, just enough to tempt but never enough to satisfy. When Fatalis charged, it found a trap, a pit, a volley, a dozen spears from shadows it hadn't seen. Because Fatalis wasn't just muscle. It was a pattern, and patterns could be broken. But south, farther into the continent, there was a third, a monster in full, Smilodon populator. It was the largest of them all, stronger than Fatalis, heavier than gracilis, a juggernaut with fangs. It didn't ambush, it dominated. Where populator walked, the forest cleared. Even dire wolves gave it space. Its forelimbs were like battering rams, dense, thick, brutal. It could drag prey twice its size, crush rib cages with a single paw strike. Humans could not fight this thing head on. So they didn't. They changed the battlefield. Camps in populator territory were built high, on cliffs, on stilts, above rivers. Children were trained to listen for tremors. Not footfalls, but wait, because when populator moved, the earth remembered. Fires were built in triple rings. Snares surrounded by bone spikes were hidden in the underbrush. Poison-tipped spears, made from fermented roots and snake venom, waited in racks. This wasn't just defense. It was a statement. We see you. We know you. We are ready. The hunters began drawing them. Not just as beasts, but as individuals. One had a notch in its fang, another a scar across the eye. They gave them names, not as friends, as enemies. Because when you name your monster, You rob it of mystery, and once the mystery fades, only tactics remain. The gracilis demanded awareness. Stealth met with signal. Speed met with traps. Fatalist demanded structure. Boldness answered with misdirection. Precision defeated by distraction. Populator demanded reverence. Power met with terrain. Mass met with manipulation. Each species was a different puzzle. Each required its own solution, and the humans adapted. No universal weapon. No one-size spear. Instead, a toolkit. Clubs waited for close defense. Javelins balanced for mid-range throws. Atlatls designed for speed, angle, and arc. They used terrain, used scent, used time itself. They laid ambushes based on migration paths, set fires not to kill, but to corral. They let fear build over days. And the saber-tooths began to change too. They grew cautious. They scouted longer. They aborted attacks more frequently. Because for the first time in history, the prey had learned its predator, down to the fang length, the shoulder girth, the hunting radius. Humans became profile artists, monster readers, behavioral tacticians. They didn't just survive the saber-tooth. They studied it, understood it, outthought it, and over time outlasted it. Because in the long war between brain and brawn, it is not enough to fight. You must understand, you must adapt to the enemy in front of you, not the one in your mind. Gracilis, Fatalis, Populator, 3 monsters, 3 blueprints. And one truth: to win against nature's deadliest predators, you must know them better than they know themselves. That is the human edge. That is the lesson of the saber-tooth. And that is why we're still here. Inter-predator chess. The moon sat high over the Pleistocene plains. Wind hissed through the long grass. Somewhere, distant howls fractured the silence. Deep, mournful, hungry. The camp did not stir, not in fear, but in calculation. This was not the moment to fight. It was the moment to listen, to wait, to watch the board, because tonight the saber-tooth did not hunt alone. It hunted in a world of rivals, and the humans, they were not pieces on the board anymore. They had learned to play. Nature, for all its chaos, moves with rhythm. Kill, eat, rest, breed, repeat. But when predators grow large, when multiple beasts stalk the same herds, when muscle outweighs mobility, when teeth grow too long and forests grow too thin, those rhythms crash into each other. Smilodon did not hunt in a vacuum. It shared the world with giants. The dire wolf, the short-faced bear, the American lion, all apex predators, all hungry, all territorial. The Pleistocene was not ruled by any one monster. It was a bloody chessboard of collision and compromise. And humans, small though they were, had one piece the others lacked: strategy. They began by observing, hidden in trees, behind boulders, eyes squinting through smoke. And they saw patterns. Smilodon and the dire wolf did not share kills. They fought over them, snarls in the night, bones shattered by paws, blood spilled not from prey but from rivals. Humans noted how saber-tooths fed quickly and left, how wolves lingered, returning in packs, how the bear came last, and everyone else vanished when it arrived. There was order in the violence, and in that order, opportunity. The first tactic was avoidance. Camps were placed between territories, not in saber-tooth hunting zones, not in bear dens, but in the grey zones, borderlands where the predators met, clashed, and often avoided each other out of mutual respect. These regions were dangerous, yes, but not predictably so. And in unpredictability, the humans found space to exist. They lived like ghosts, fires buried low, food sealed in hides and hung high. And when 2 beasts met nearby, when a saber-toothed growl answered a wolf's howl, humans knew that was not their fight. It was time to move in. Scavenging was not shame. It was survival by intellect. After a predator fight, the winner gorged, but rarely cleaned the kill, as the saber-tooth especially ate only soft organs and left quickly. Its fangs were tools of precision, but fragile. It couldn't chew bone, didn't linger long. What remained? Rib meat, tendons, sometimes even untouched limbs. Humans waited until both predators fled or lay wounded. Then they moved, fast, silent, tools ready. The old, the young, the swift. They cleaned what the monsters left behind. And then they vanished, back into the cracks of the wilderness. But over time, humans grew bolder. They didn't just scavenge. They began to manipulate. They'd leave carcasses in known predator lanes, not for eating, but for incitement, fresh kill, 2 blood trails, no clear owner. Inevitably, 2 rivals would arrive, a lion, a saber-tooth, a wolf pack, a bear. They fought, and the humans learned. They learned which beast had the faster charge, which one blinked first, which one roared louder, but struck slower. Knowledge became power. Power became prediction, and prediction became plan. In one valley, where saber-tooth and lion territory overlapped, humans laid bait, half a deer, strung to a thicket, downwind from both dens. They waited. The lion came first, territorial, arrogant, marked the ground, growled into the void. Then came the saber-tooth, silent, slower. It didn't roar. It circled, and then it attacked. The 2 predators clashed, and as they fought, the humans moved in behind. They weren't there for meat. They were there for information. Which beast responded faster? Which one retreated first when fire was lit? Which one ignored human scent and which one flinched? Every fight answered a question. Every rivalry was a textbook written in blood and claw. Eventually, humans did more than observe. They began to exploit timing. If a lion killed a mammoth, humans didn't just wait. They shadowed, watched the lion gorge and leave. They knew the saber-tooth wouldn't approach until night. And so, with a narrow window, they moved, harvested meat, cut fat, left just enough for the next predator. And when the saber-tooth arrived, it found food, but also the scent of fire, human oil, foreign tracks. It hesitated. Again and again, it hesitated. And in hesitation, it grew unsure. And unsure predators make mistakes. This was inter-predator chess. And the humans were not pawns. They were players. They didn't need claws or teeth. They had time. They had maps, not on paper but in memory, where the lion dens were, where the wolves ran, where the saber-tooth circled low. They played them all against each other, not as equals, but as opponents in a game of survival. Let the beasts waste energy on blood feuds. The humans would take the scraps and live another day, but not just live, thrive. As predators fought, humans built. Mapped trails, marked kill zones, developed strategies. They trained scouts, young ones who memorized scent trails, tracked rival movements, understood the subtle differences between Smilodon prints and lion pads. They weren't just surviving between monsters. They were surviving because of them. Every dead predator left behind not just a kill, but data, a broken fang, a claw wound, a pattern of retreat. And humans turned that data into legacy. So, when we imagine our ancestors under threat, when we picture them huddled in fear, know this. They were not just the hunted, they were observers, manipulators, strategists. In a world of monsters, they were the mind that watched, and learned, and played the game better. Because fire is powerful, because spears are sharp. But in the end, the most powerful weapon on the Pleistocene chessboard was this: memory, passed from eye to eye, from scout to elder, from campfire tale to midnight lesson. Know your monsters, Know their enemies and let them fight for you. That was the unspoken rule. That was the human edge, and in the long war for survival, it worked. The final stand. There was a time when the shadows moved with muscle, when every rustle in the grass might have been fangs, when the ground itself seemed to growl, but that time was ending. The saber-tooth, once the sovereign of fear, was running out of world, and the humans were no longer hiding. They were building, and every fire that was lit, every camp that took root, every valley settled and mapped was another line drawn against the giants. The final war wasn't fought with roars. It was fought with growth. Smilodon had reigned for millennia, an apex predator tailored by time-wide jaws, dagger-length teeth, neck thick with killing intent. It needed no fire. It needed no tools, just silence, just power, just one clean strike. And yet, this perfect machine began to vanish, not from disease, not from defeat in battle, but from something slower, something quieter, encroachment. The signs were subtle at first. Migration paths, once clear, became clogged with traps and tools. Herds, once easy to ambush, grew nervous under the human eye. Prey grew scarce, then unpredictable. And Smilodon, so specialized, so lethal, found itself out of rhythm. The humans didn't need to fight it. They just needed to push it to the edges. And with every new generation, they pushed harder. Camps grew permanent, no longer temporary circles of stone and ash, but structures, woven walls, guarded perimeters. Fire wasn't just for night. It marked boundaries, lit paths, warned others. Children learned the smell of predators. Scouts tracked Smilodon prints as easily as deer. The fear once reserved for the saber-tooth began to reverse. Now it was Smilodon that hesitated at the scent of humans. The great cats retreated, not all at once, but piece by piece. Range maps today show a steady shrinkage from plains to valleys, from valleys to forests, from forests to the deep remote places. They didn't die out overnight. They were squeezed out, starved of prey, blocked by walls of fire, confused by noise, scent and steel. This was not nature's extinction. It was human pressure, applied slowly, thoroughly, strategically. The last stand of Smilodon wasn't a noble duel. There was no dramatic final charge, no last roar under a blood-red sky. There was only silence. The last bones are found in isolation. No herd, no pride, no signs of kin. Just one body, often female, often young, starved, worn, alone. A queen without a kingdom. But still they held on, in patches. Remote highlands, unreachable canyons, frozen ridges where no human dared settle. And in those places for a few final centuries, they lingered, ghosts of a dying age, fangs beneath frost, eyes behind trees. Some human children may have glimpsed them and thought they saw demons. Others heard nothing at all, just a strange emptiness where fear used to be. Because when apex predators vanish, the silence is unnatural. Why did they go extinct? Climate? Prey loss? Competition? Yes, all of it. But layered atop it all was the undeniable truth. They couldn't adapt. Their tools were locked into their bones, their tactics fossilized into instinct. But humans evolved their weapons every generation. They didn't inherit strength. They invented it. Spears grew longer, traps grew smarter, fires burned brighter, longer, hotter, and the saber-tooth did not. The last known Smilodon fossils are found in scattered patches across the Americas. No great graveyard, no final gathering, just hints, fragments, as if the earth herself barely remembers them. But humans remember, in stories of monsters, in cave paintings of fang and claw, in whispered tales around fire pits. They became legend long before they vanished. because even as they died, they shaped us. What kind of predator must you be to leave such a mark on a species that outlived you? Smilodon fatalis did not fall easily, but it fell to something no fang could pierce, no muscle could resist. Intelligence. And when it was gone, the fear didn't go with it. The memory remained. It shaped weapons. It shaped stories. It shaped the very idea of monsters. So, if you ever walk through an ancient canyon and the wind shifts just right, you may feel something behind you. Not real, not flesh. But legacy. The ghost of the beast that once ruled this land. The one we didn't kill with tooth or claw, but with time, with fire, with thought. The final stand was not a battle. It was a slow collapse. One footstep at a time, one spark, one spear, one camp. And the world grew quieter, until only we remained. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the ones who remembered and who adapted the tar pits speak. The ground remembers what we forget. It keeps secrets long after the storytellers die. And in one quiet corner of Los Angeles, beneath layers of asphalt and time, the earth whispered back, not with words, not with voices, but with bones. Bones that told of a world swallowed in tar and silence. And finally listened to. Rancho La Brea. A name now stitched into textbooks and museum plaques. But once it was nothing more than a trap. A predator's mistake. A slow death beneath black ooze. A sticky graveyard of giants, saber-tooths, dire wolves, mammoths, ground sloths, and humans. That was the surprise. Not just watchers, not just scavengers, but participants. And maybe victors. The bones began to speak. Not loudly, not all at once, but in patterns. A broken femur here, a punctured rib there, deep gouges on a smilodon's shoulder blade, too clean, too sharp, too deliberate. Not the tearing of teeth, not the scatter of time, but tools, hands, people, cut marks, clean, repeated, purposeful, some angled for tendon removal, others for meat, and some, chillingly, for disabling targeted damage to legs, to joints, to places no animal would naturally attack, but a strategist would. This wasn't luck. It was knowledge. It was intent. For years it was debated. Were humans scavenging the dead, cleaning up what the tar had trapped? Or were they more involved? The evidence grew, and with it, a picture emerged. Not of frightened prey watching from the trees, but of a species that had learned, studied, waited. And when the moment came, struck first. Enter the machines. The AI didn't care about stories. It didn't believe in monsters or heroes. It believed in data. And when fed thousands of bone fragments from La Brea, it started to whisper what paleontologists had only suspected. The algorithms matched tool marks to known human butchery. They clustered injuries consistent with ambush. They found patterns, geometry, timing, repetition. And then it said it plainly. These cats weren't just dying. They were being hunted. Think of it, a smilodon, 800 pounds of raw terror slipping near a tar pit to stalk a trapped bison, only to be watched, not by prey, but by predators with firelight in their eyes and stone in their fists. They'd set the trap behind the trap, not for the bison, but for the hunter. The saber-tooth, used to controlling the night, walked straight into a new kind of ambush. And the earth, unwilling witness, preserved every moment in bone and pitch. We once feared them, but here, buried in asphalt, was proof. The fear went both ways. Some saber-toothed skulls bear healed wounds, spear-tipped scars that never killed, only marked, a cracked canine, a healed leg. These cats had seen us before, and remembered. They grew wary, avoidant, conservative, but caution wasn't enough. Humans had stopped running. They had started planning. The tar didn't lie. It told of a species that didn't just survive terror, it outthought it. Fossils revealed dietary shifts. Isotope analysis showed some smilodons were starving, their prey disrupted, their routines broken, their advantage gone. And humans, more bones, more tools, more presence, always expanding, always observing, always adapting, until the saber-tooth had nowhere left to go. The great irony? The tar preserved both predator and prey, locked together, frozen in the moment their war turned. And as we studied them, bone by bone, data by data, we realized this wasn't just survival. This was a campaign. The first war ever fought with strategy, not strength, and the winner was the one that remembered. The fossils had no voice, but we gave them one. We read their fractures like ancient scripts. We fed their chemical ghosts into machines that don't forget. And what we saw was clearer than storybooks, more honest than myth. Humans hunted Smilodon, not often, not easily, but enough. Enough to prove we weren't merely surviving giants. We were conquering them. And perhaps that's why the tar still pulls us in. Not just scientists, not just tourists, but dreamers, wanderers, children standing at glass displays staring at teeth longer than fingers. Because deep down we know those bones belong to the ones who hunted us, and somehow we turned the tide. The saber-tooth didn't vanish in a single season, but when the bones stopped accumulating, when the last one slipped into silence, there was no roar. Just a gap, a space in the food chain, a missing heartbeat in the ecosystem. And we filled it, not with fangs, but with memory. The earth does not lie, the tar does not forgive, and when it speaks we listen. Because buried beneath modern cities are the echoes of the first great victory, not carved in stone but slashed into ribs, not shouted across history, but whispered from bones. The mind that killed the monster. It didn't die in one night. There was no final showdown, no hero's spear through the heart, no sudden thunderclap of victory echoing across the savannah. The monster didn't fall with drama. It unraveled, slowly, brilliantly, inevitably, because the mind was more patient than muscle, and fire, though warm, could be cold in its calculation. The Smilodon was strength incarnate, its body a vault of muscle, its jaws a bear trap, its presence a nightmare from before language. But even monsters blink, even legends hesitate. And that second, barely more than a breath, was all it took for the mind to find a crack, and wedge open history. The final blow wasn't a spear, it was strategy. That ancient, quiet voice whispering in the shadows. What if we don't fight alone? What if we bait? What if we wait? What if we don't challenge strength but exhaust it? This was the birth of a new kind of war, and it wasn't about courage. It was about control. The tribe became a net. They no longer scattered like prey. They moved like pieces on a board. One behind, one beside, one ahead, each step designed to shape the monster's path. The strongest stayed hidden. The fastest showed themselves just long enough to be seen. The bait. A whisper of panic, a flash of movement, not fleeing, luring. The Smilodon gave chase, as it always had. But the ground had changed. This wasn't the open plain, this was a gauntlet. Narrow paths between stone, pits disguised with brush. Raised platforms where the spears waited. The cat, all power and instinct, followed the script it always knew, but the script had been rewritten. Distraction, bait, rotation. The same tactics modern soldiers train with, learned around fire, passed from voice to voice in the language of survival. One throws stones from the flank, another screams to draw the head. Two more circle, slow, silent. And then, when the creature turns, jaws flared a spear from behind. Not lethal, but loud, painful, confusing, and confusion was death. They didn't need to kill in a single stroke. They needed to unmake the predator, strip its confidence, erode its rhythm, introduce what it never evolved for, doubt, because the Smilodon didn't calculate, it committed. One lunge, one kill, one burst of certainty, but now the prey didn't freeze, it flowed. The group moved like water, coordinated, reactive, relentless. Attrition became a weapon, small wounds, forced chases, hours without a clean strike. The great cat, born for ambush, was dragged into a new kind of war, a war of pressure, of exhaustion, of mind. It wasn't about overpowering the monster. It was about rewriting its reality. The humans didn't always win. Scars remained, lives were lost, but the victories began to stack. And slowly the predator started to flinch. It watched the fire from further away. It hesitated before charging. It circled camps it once would have stormed. The balance had shifted. The hunted had become tacticians. And that's how the monster died. Not in a roar, but in a recalculation. It stopped ruling the night, stopped owning the trees, stopped being the nightmare behind every rustling bush. Because humans had done what claws could not. They studied the threat. They adapted. They learned. Some say intelligence is the ultimate weapon, but more precisely, pattern recognition is to see, to remember, to act with intention. That's what split Homo sapiens from the darkness around them. They didn't just respond, they designed outcomes. And the saber-tooth, as mighty as it was, had no answer for that. The tactics live on, in how wolves hunt, in how militaries train, in how children on playgrounds coordinate games of chase, bait, flank, trap. It's all still there, etched into our neurons, wired into our ancestry, because the mind that killed the monster didn't stop at Smilodon. It kept going, kept sharpening, kept winning. And we wonder why we fear the dark less now. It's not just light we carry, it's the memory of when we stood together, minds synchronized, and watched the most terrifying predator of the Pleistocene falter. Not because it was weak, but because we were clever. The monster died. But the mind did not rest. It turned from survival to strategy, from fear to foresight, from prey to apex. Look in the mirror. Stand still. Silence everything around you. The flicker of screens, the hum of machines, the distant pulse of artificial stars. Now imagine a forest where nothing man-made has ever stepped. No fence, no flame, no footprint. Let the air thicken with the breath of 10,000 years ago. That's where we stood. Back when the world was balanced by tooth and claw. When nature's rules were ancient and unchallenged. When a saber-toothed shadow could silence a village with a growl. We were not kings then. We were clever prey. But cleverness is a spark, and once lit, it does not go out. It spreads, it consumes, it transforms everything it touches, and soon fear turned to fury, survival turned to mastery, and we became something the world had never seen. Not just another predator, but the final one. Smilodon did not go quietly. Its extinction wasn't a meteor strike, nor a slow fade into cold. It was a chess match played over centuries, on the board of earth instinct, and the mind won every move. We isolated it, outmaneuvered it, cut off its food, cracked its code. And when the last of them slipped into the tar or the snow or the night, the ground did not shake. The sky did not mourn, but something ancient ended. Not just the predator, but the balance. Because Smilodon was never just an animal, it was a gatekeeper, a force of nature forged in hunger and precision. Its presence kept populations in check, kept tribes sharp, kept fear where it belonged, in the bones. But when we erased it, something shifted. The world became quieter, easier, ours. And in the silence, something else woke up. Look around now. What do you see? No fangs behind the trees, no roars in the wind, no eyes glowing in the tall grass. We won, and in doing so we inherited the throne. But here's the truth the mirror reflects. The final apex predator isn't made of fur or claw. It has no growl, no pounce. It walks upright, speaks in complex symbols, builds cities instead of dens, and it remembers. We became what we feared. We absorbed everything the predator taught us: ambush, coordination, dominance. But we added something it never had: imagination. We didn't just kill to eat. We killed to sculpt landscapes, to shape worlds, to make symbols out of bones and meaning out of blood. That is the legacy we carry. That is the crown we wear. And now, when we look at fossilized fangs behind museum glass, we feel nothing. No terror, only awe. We walk by its skeleton with coffee in hand, scrolling digital screens, explaining its extinction in soft academic tones. But deep down the bones still whisper, it wasn't nature, it was you. Because we didn't just outlive the predator, we ended it. And we didn't stop. One by one the others fell: the short-faced bear, the dire wolf, the giant ground sloth, the mammoth. All titans, all ancient engines of evolution, all erased, not by famine or flood or plague, but by one mind, ours. And now we are alone at the top. There is no creature we fear in the dark, no rival that stalks us in our sleep. We are not prey, but we are not innocent either. We are the architects of extinction, the minds that didn't just survive the monsters, but dismantled them with fire, with stone, with understanding. So what happens now? When the final monster is gone, when there's no threat left to outwit, outfight, outplan, do we rest? Do we look up and build skyward? Or do we turn on ourselves as predators with no prey often do? Look in the mirror, not at your face, but behind your eyes. That's where the true predator lives. Not in your teeth, not in your fists, but in your thoughts. That ancient calculating spark that first watched a saber-tooth from the shadows and said, I can beat you. That mind never left. It only grew. It only evolved. It only changed its targets. Now it hunts different things: resources, territory, time, each other. And maybe, just maybe, it hunts itself. Because once you become the top of the food chain, there's nowhere left to climb. And when you are the final predator, the only thing left to fear is your reflection. So remember this: the saber-tooth did not vanish, not truly. It lives inside the mind that defeated it, in the logic of tactics, in the rhythms of war, in the blueprints of domination. But so does the responsibility to protect what remains, to honor what was lost, to never forget the price of victory. Because we are no longer the hunted, but that does not make us gods. It makes us keepers of fire, of balance, of memory. And when we look in the mirror, really look, we must see both: the face of the survivor and the shadow of the monster we replaced.